These two 16-year-olds allegedly threatened to shoot up a preschool, and they're on the loose right now in the city that they threatened. So a few days ago in Wyoming, Otis Edlund and Quentin Wyrick stole a vehicle. They're 16 years old, they are not allowed to own firearms, and they stole allegedly a few AR-15s. Then an acquaintance of the two called into the police and reported that one of them had told them they were planning on shooting up a preschool, and that afterwards they were planning on taking their own life. By the way, this is the vehicle that they should be driving right now. I have a lot of followers in Houston, Texas. That's where I live right now, so this story hits particularly close to home, especially since I have family in League City. And yeah, this threat wouldn't have been credible except for the fact that these two were actually sighted today in League City, Texas, which is the exact town in which they threatened to shoot up said preschool. Now, at this moment, the League City police isn't actually considering this threat to be credible, but they have stepped up the police presence in schools around the city, and it's definitely concerning because these two have actually been seen in League. What these two planned, I don't know why they stole guns in a car and ran away. But it is a bit concerning because today marks the 6-year anniversary of the Stoneman Douglas shooting. That was the shooting at the high school in Florida on Valentine's Day. And I don't know if these two are planning to recreate a massacre like that, but definitely to all my Houston area followers, please keep an eye out. Don't approach these two if you see them, and call 911 immediately.
When police searched this murder suspect, they found a severed human hand in his pocket. On the 10th of January, police in Colorado were called to a suspected homicide. They got a tip suggesting that a deceased female was in the Foundation Creek. The tip came from a roommate of 26-year-old Solomon Martinez. Now, the person who'd rang in the tip had witnessed Solomon arrive at a car wash the day prior with blood all over his hands. They reported that he had dirt all over his clothes and used a jet wash to remove the blood from his hands. Police then turned up to the creek and discovered the female victim. They promptly arrested the 26-year-old, and when they searched him, they found a severed human hand in his coat pocket. It's reported that it was inside a plastic bag, and it's alleged that Solomon admitted it had been there for 2 days. A friend of the roommate was questioned by police and stated that they were in a car with Solomon on the same day and they drove to Mohawk Road. It's alleged that Solomon dragged a decapitated body out of the boot of his car to the creek. He has since been arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder. The victim has been identified as Renee Portillos, who was 47 years old. This teenager stabbed a stranger because he was in a bad mood. It was the 15th of May 2023. 50-year-old Sarah Taylor was walking back from Lidl one evening carrying 2 bags of shopping. As she made her way home along Bohemia Road in Hastings, she was attacked. 17-year-old Thomas Whaling stabbed Sarah unprovoked in the chest, causing a punctured lung and internal bleeding. He used a 15-centimeter knife in the horrific attack. Thomas Whaling was with his friend Thomas Mann at the time, and the pair fled the scene. The woman was airlifted to a hospital in Brighton after members of the public stopped to help. She miraculously survived, however she was left with absolutely horrifying injuries, mobility issues and PTSD. Thomas was captured on CCTV wearing a hoodie and a scarf over his face. It's reported that after the attack, he made Thomas Mann burn their clothes. Thomas Mann actually strangely filmed the clothes burning and narrated it as he did so, stating, "Nearly gone." Thomas was arrested for attempted murder, and at his trial he stated he thought the woman was a rival gang member. However, his friend Thomas Mann actually testified against him, stating that they could tell that Sarah was female even from behind. The judge declared that Thomas had intentionally taken a knife out that night and attacked her at random due to being in a bad mood after an argument with his dad. He was given 13 years in prison and 3 years on extended license. He also got 9 months for knife possession.
This girl spent 8 years in an underground cell after being abducted. In 1998, Natasha Kampusch was walking to school when she was abducted by Wolfgang Priklopil, who lured her into his white van. He then drove her to his house in a suburb of Vienna. For over 8 years, Natasha was held captive in a small, windowless underground cell beneath Wolfgang's house. During this time, she endured physical and emotional abuse, isolation, and manipulation. In 2006, she managed to escape when Wolfgang briefly left her unattended. She used this opportunity to run to a neighbor's house and seek help. Wolfgang, realizing that she had escaped, committed suicide later that day by throwing himself in front of a train. Following her escape, Campush faced a media frenzy and intense public interest. She went through a period of rehabilitation and therapy to help her reintegrate into society and recover from her traumatic experience.
A teenager from Manchester was found hiding from police in this giant stuffed teddy bear. 18-year-old Joshua Dobson had been on the run from police in the UK. He had been a wanted man since around May 2023. Now, he had allegedly stolen a Mitsubishi SUV worth over £100,000. He'd allegedly filled up the car with petrol and then fled without paying. Police had apparently been on the hunt for him ever since. The police team in Rochdale received some intelligence informing them that the fugitive may be staying at his girlfriend's address in Rochdale. When they initially entered the property, they didn't actually realise he was there. That was until they noticed a giant stuffed teddy bear in the corner of the room. One police officer recalled doing a double take when he noticed that the bear appeared to be breathing. On closer inspection, they found Joshua hiding inside of the bear and arrested him. Do you think you could have the dead bodies of 3 of your friends in your back garden for 2 days without noticing? This is the shocking new case that's almost too strange to be true. It was the 7th of January in Kansas City, Missouri. 3 friends decided to go to a 4th friend's house to watch some sport on the TV. The men were Clayton McGeeney, Ricky Johnson, and David Harrington. The friend they went to see was named Jordan. Now, David's mum Jennifer said that after he went over to the house, he was never seen again. There was no word from the 3 men for 2 days, and attempts to contact them were unsuccessful. In the end, Clayton's fiancée decided to take matters into her own hands. She went over to Jordan's house and no one answered the door. She then made a hideous discovery. She found one of the men dead on the back porch. When police raced to the scene, they made another shocking discovery. The 2 other men were deceased in the back garden. It was allegedly only then that Jordan came out of his bedroom. Jordan spoke through his attorney and stated that he had no idea the men were there. He claimed that he never uses the back door and always goes out the front. However, the men's cars were still actually parked outside the front of the house, so that doesn't make sense. It's also reported that multiple people tried to get in contact with Jordan and ask about the whereabouts of his friends, but he never answered. Police have reportedly ruled out foul play and state that the man had no motive to hurt his friends. Their theory is that the men may have frozen to death. However, that doesn't make any sense either because they could have just come back inside the house. The cause of death for the men has not yet been determined and Jordan has not been charged with a crime.
This is by far the most brutal way somebody has ever died, and whatever you do, don't look up the picture. This is Octavio da Silva, and he was a 20-year-old soccer referee in Brazil. And on June 30th, 2013, he was refereeing a soccer game when he sent off a player named Josmir Santos Abreu, who was 31 years old. He refused to leave the field and began to fight with the referee Octavio. Josmir threw a punch which made Octavio draw a knife from his pocket and repeatedly stab Josmir. Josmir died on his way to the hospital, and when fans watching the game, including Josmir's family and friends, found out about his death, something absolutely disturbing happened. They all invaded the field and stoned Octavio before decapitating him and then ripping his limbs off his body with just their strength and no weapons. And they then put his head on a stick in the middle of the field like a flag. And what makes this even worse is that a graphic video surfaced online shortly after the incident, showing medical personnel reassembling Octavio's body. The video and pictures are extremely and utterly disturbing. I seriously don't recommend looking them up. The way that his limbs looked after being ripped off is extremely unsettling to look at, because you see strings of flesh, tissue, and bone because nothing was cut off properly since everything was brutally ripped off. This case is just absolutely awful, and why in the world did Octavio pull out a knife when somebody just punched him? If he didn't stab Josmir to death, he would still be alive today and not torn apart in this brutal fashion. Just imagine literally being ripped limb from limb by an angry group of soccer fans, and there's nothing you can do as they pull your body apart.
You will never go near the woods again if you watch this documentary. It is about hunters and people who specialize in being in the wilderness who just vanish without a trace. And I'm not talking like they wander into the woods and just go missing. In one of these cases, a guy went into the woods with a group of his friends and they went hunting. He was only about a couple of feet away from them when suddenly they turned around and he was gone. In many of these cases, massive search parties are released to try to find these people, and they are never found. A couple of theories are discussed in this doc, like paranormal theories, Sasquatch theories, ideas that maybe they fell into crevasses. If trained professionals are going missing in the wilderness, you bet your ass I'm not going anywhere near the woods. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything weird in the wilderness, and hit follow for more docs to watch.
When a man installed hidden cameras in his kitchen, he had no idea he would uncover a hideous crime. If you're a fan of Breaking Bad, you'll probably find this case really interesting. 37-year-old Sarah Sheffer lived with her husband in Missouri. She worked as a high school teacher in the local area. Her husband had actually started becoming really unwell. He noticed he was feeling tired, he was feeling confused and very sick. He was also experiencing symptoms of blurred vision and also a very dry mouth. Now, after initially being completely clueless as to what was causing this, he started noticing a pattern. The symptoms seemed to align with when he was eating or drinking. This apparently happened on 8 different occasions. On the 1st of January, police report that Sarah had bought her husband a drink and he noticed it was tasting very bitter. When he confronted her about this, she allegedly claimed that she had urinated in it. Obviously completely confused, he decided to set up secret cameras in the house to hopefully get an insight as to what was going on. It's alleged that one of the cameras in the kitchen captured Sarah putting the root of lily of the valley in one of his smoothies. Now, lily of the valley actually appeared in the TV series Breaking Bad, and it's actually known to contain a substance that slows the heart. Sarah has since been charged with attempted murder, and her school have placed her on leave for the time being. Imagine going to your friend's house and stumbling upon her dad's dead body in a storage shed. Crystal Brooke Howell was 17 years old and lived in Maggie Valley, Northern Carolina. It was 2014 and she was living with her dad, 50-year-old Michael Howell, who worked as a sports editor. When she was 12, her parents had got divorced and she ended up living with just her dad. Their home was a fairly remote cabin on Sheepback Mountain. It was the 24th of February and Michael and Crystal went shopping in Ingalls. On their shopping trip, Crystal actually attempted to shoplift. Her dad caught her in the act, and it's believed that this may have triggered her to want to murder him. When the pair got back home, Michael went to have a nap and Crystal went into the shower. Shortly after showering, she took a shotgun and went into the lounge where Michael was sleeping. She shot him once in the head as he lay on the sofa. She then took her dad's dead body and hid it in a storage shed on the property. She then went about disposing of the sofa and actually ended up selling the shotgun. Following the killing, Crystal used her deceased dad's money to fund a lifestyle of substance-fueled parties. She started driving her dad's car around, having people around to the house, and generally trashing the place. When her friends questioned her about where her dad had gone, she conducted a story about him moving to Georgia and then ending his own life. This all went on for about a month before it started to unravel. It was the 22nd of March and some of Crystal's friends were actually moving a pinball machine into the storage shed. That's when they spotted a plastic container and inside Michael's body. Police were called to the scene and Crystal was immediately arrested. She was charged with her dad's murder. There was obviously not only circumstantial evidence, but there was a huge amount of forensic evidence as well at the scene. This was coupled with the fact that Crystal could definitely have had a motive. Being free from her dad meant in her eyes that she was free to live a life where she could spend his money and not have to worry about taking accountability for her actions. In October 2016, she would plead guilty to the murder and was given a minimum of 30 years in prison.
Welcome to Famous Autopsies Part 2. In this series, I'll be breaking down famous celebrity autopsy reports, so this is a massive trigger warning. Today we are going to be talking about Kurt Cobain, who was the lead singer of Nirvana. Kurt Cobain was outspoken about his struggles with mental health and addiction, often including it into his songs, but he also struggled with health issues. He was affected by chronic bronchitis and debilitating stomach pains. On March 31st, 1994, he fled from a rehab facility after just 3 days and took a cab to a gun shop in Seattle where, according to the receipt, he purchased shotgun shells, and on April 8th, an electrician who was meant to install security lighting found what he believed to be a sleeping Kurt Cobain in a studio attached to his house. But upon closer inspection, he saw blood coming from his ears. Sadly, Kurt Cobain was dead at just 27. His external exam revealed numerous needle puncture marks, with associating bruising and an entrance wound in the front roof of his mouth. It's accompanied by several lacerations, some with tissue hanging, The lacerations are likely a result of gases leaving the barrel with strong force. The internal exam revealed that the path of the bullet was upwards, front to back and slightly left to right. His skull sustained several fractures, meaning broken in multiple places in several regions. His brain was transected by the bullet, meaning severed. The lack of blood on scene is due to the fact that the entrance wound was inside of his mouth and the bullet settled in his head, meaning there was no exit wound. Rest in peace to Kurt Cobain, you will always be missed.
Let's talk about one of the scariest photos ever taken, the Samantha Koenig photo. I have been terrified of this picture for years. And if you don't know why this picture is horrifying, let me explain why. So on February 1st, 2012, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working her barista job in Anchorage, Alaska, when suddenly a man named Israel Keys enters her job and kidnaps her. He then proceeds to do vile things to her and then unalives her. After this, while the city and her family are looking for her, Israel goes on a cruise and comes back to the news that they're looking for her. So what he does is he goes back, grabs her body, props her up, duct tapes her mouth, braids her hair, and sews her eyes open, and then proceeds to take this picture. And then sends this picture to Samantha's family and asks for $30,000. This, of course, was all in an effort to make it seem like she was still alive, and to basically be given all that money. However, he would later be caught in Texas, and then ended himself awaiting trial on December 2nd of that year. Now, the effort that he made to make her look alive in his ransom picture, to me, is absolutely horrifying. Now, I do want to state that this is an FBI recreation of the picture. However, that picture is somewhere locked away, never to be seen by the public, which I am so glad that Samantha and her family at least have that sort of privacy in this. But yeah, that to me is the scariest picture to ever exist. And to the people that worked on this case, yeah, keep that picture locked up. Okay, I'm glad you are. I'm glad you are.
This girl unalived her little brother, then consumed his private parts. This is 5-year-old Maikon Rauk and his 18-year-old sister Karina, and they both live with their mother Daniela in Brazil. On April 4th of 2019, Daniela had to do some shopping, so she left Maikon back at home with Karina. Daniela returned home over an hour later, and for some reason she wasn't able to open the front door, it just wouldn't open. Daniela had yelled for her children to come help open the door for her, but Karina yelled back that she couldn't open it for her. Daniela started to get worried, so she had contacted her brother-in-law to come break down the door. Once they both got inside the home, they were met with a horrific scene. Karina had unalived Maikon, partially decapitated him, and mutilated him. The family dog started to attack Karina, and she retaliated and bit the dog. Karina then started to attack the uncle by throwing things at him and hitting him. She even tried to flee the scene, but she was luckily caught. Once police had arrived and saw Maikon's body, they saw that his body was surrounded by black candles. That's when they discovered that Karina had cut and eaten some parts of Maikon's body. Karina was quickly arrested and taken to the police station. At first, Karina refused to speak, but later on, she confessed everything. She stated that she asked Maikon if he wanted to come in her room to play some games, and of course, Maikon agreed. Karina grabbed a pillow, pinned him down, and suffocated him. Karina then grabbed a knife and tried to remove his head. She had left Maikon partially decapitated. Karina then inserted the knife into his eyes and burned his feet with a lighter. She then removed his genitals and ate them. Karina was charged with aggravated homicide, attempted murder of her uncle, hiding a dead body, and biting the family dog. Karina was sent to a psychiatric hospital, and she continues to receive medical, social, and psychological care.
This Ring doorbell video will creep you the hell out. In the video, you can see what looks like somebody or something slithering across this guy's yard. Watch this. So what do you guys think? Was that just some weird person in the middle of the night just crawling in the ground? Could that have been some sort of creature? And let me know in the comments down below what you think and what you would have done if if you saw something like that.
Minutes after this photo was taken, this woman's husband did the unthinkable. Butterfly Valley in Mugla, Turkey is an incredible popular beauty spot. In June 2018, Hakan Hassal was visiting this spot with his wife, 32-year-old Semra, who are both pictured here. The pair was expecting a child soon as Semra was 7 months pregnant. The cliff is about 1,000 feet up and many tourists are drawn there by the beautiful views. But little did Semra know she had been lured there for an entirely different reason. Semra was actually afraid of heights, but Hakan convinced her that the trip to the cliff would pay off. Prior to the pair going on this trip, Hakan had actually taken out life insurance for his wife. On the day in question, he lured her to the edge of the cliff to take a selfie. The couple had been up there for about 3 hours and Hakan had been waiting for the exact time to strike. After taking the photo and realizing nobody was watching, he cautiously shoved his pregnant wife off the edge of the cliff, causing her to plummet to her death as well as their unborn child. A witness who was driving by was flagged down by Hakan, who was described as completely calm. The man later stated that I was driving there and I saw someone waving at me and I stopped. Hakan then came over and said that his wife had fallen down the cliff. They then tried to get to the edge of the cliff for a better look, but Hakan did not go down there with them and he was not acting like a man who just lost his wife from falling down a cliff. Photos of the couple were then shared on the news and a tourist came forward to say that they had actually seen the pair too. And they noted that it was odd that the pair was scrambling down the rocky area to get to the very edge. Suspicions then were raised further when Hakan tried to claim an insurance payout after his wife's death. Hakan tried to claim insanity, but he was ordered to serve at least 30 years behind bars. But in my opinion, 30 years for killing 2 people is definitely not enough time. So, after knowing the story behind this photo, tell me how disturbing it really is now.
I've never seen a killer pose for the cameras this hard after committing such a particularly gruesome crime. Mona Fandi got her start as a Malaysian pop singer. Yeah, that didn't work out. It did actually start off semi-promising, but the album tanked and her career kind of went down in flames. And that's when Mona makes this hard pivot into black magic and witch doctor services that she performs with her husband. They and their associates, they start making bank off this and attracting the upper crust of Malaysia. We're talking government officials, politicians who just want to get that slight edge, you know, that witchcraft boost to take them to the next level in their careers. One of these high-paying customers was a rising Malaysian politician by the name of Mazlan Idris, just looking for that rejuvenating black magic cleansing experience. And they said, not only will we do it, we'll give you a couple of really cool talismans from the late president of Indonesia, and the deal was set. 2.5 million ringgit to be paid to Mona and her associates. They led Mazlan to a room that you could all picture in your head and told him to lie down, close your eyes, and imagine money falling from the sky. Well, money didn't fall from the sky that day, an axe did. I saw a lot of stuff saying it was Mona's assistant, but then I saw other stuff saying it was Mona who did it, but regardless, somebody came into that room with an axe, and during this ritual, decapitated Mazlan right there. They then separated him into 18 different pieces and spread him across this unfinished property, this house. Mona made the really bright call of buying a Mercedes-Benz and getting a facelift right after this crime, of course using Mazlan's card to do it, so she was quickly tracked down. After opting for KFC as her final death row meal, Mona, while she's being led to the execution chamber, utters her final words, "I will never die," and she did just that.
This man murdered his 5-year-old son in 1989 and then staged a scene discovering his body, and only now, 34 years later, is he being charged for his murder. On March 3rd, 1989 in South Carolina, Victor Turner told police that his son Justin had got on the school bus that morning but not returned home. In actual fact, Justin never made it to school that morning. He actually never got on the bus in the first place. He'd been murdered by his father and stepmother, strangled to death and then hidden in a camper van outside the house. A search began for Justin, and it wasn't until 3 days later that his body was discovered in the camper van, and it was discovered by his father Victor. With cameras rolling, Victor emerged from a camper van and said, "My son's in there." He held his head in his hands and looked absolutely distraught. Justin had ligature marks around his neck, suggesting that he'd been strangled, and nobody for 1 second suspected Victor. That was Victor just after finding his son's body, and as we now know, it was him that put Justin there in the first place. At one point, Justin's stepmother was actually charged in the case, but this was soon dismissed. And straight after that happened, the couple moved away, she changed her name, and they never once checked up with police to see if anything was ongoing with the case, and it soon went cold. It wasn't until 2021 that the case could be reopened, and new technology meant that fibres on Justin's wounds on his neck could be matched to fibres in the family's home. It basically proves that Justin was killed in the home and then moved to the trailer. For those 3 days, Victor knew exactly where his son was, and he's now been charged with his murder, along with his wife. I'll keep an eye on the case, and when the trial starts, I'll do an update. 3 of the UK's largest police forces are currently hunting this man, 35-year-old Abdul Azedi, after an acid attack in Clapham left a woman and her 2 daughters with life-changing injuries. Abdul is known to the family, but it hasn't been made clear exactly what their relationship is. Emergency services were called to Lesser Avenue near Clapham Common on Wednesday evening after reports of a man throwing a 3-year-old from a car. He'd then thrown a corrosive substance at his 3 victims before fleeing the scene on foot. 5 police officers and 4 members of the public were also injured in the attack, receiving burns from the corrosive substance. They were treated in hospital and have now been discharged. The female victim and one of her daughters are thought to have life-changing injuries. So who is Abdul Azedi? He is a 35-year-old asylum seeker from Afghanistan. He actually failed to enter the country twice in 2016 after trying to gain entry on a lorry. He then succeeded and, after converting to Christianity, was granted asylum. According to UK law, a person can claim asylum on the basis of religious persecution in their home country. So Abdul had converted to Christianity in a bid to stay in the UK, and a priest has confirmed that he did convert to Christianity and he was wholly committed to his new religion. Abdul then became a sex offender in 2018, and he pleaded guilty at Newcastle Crown Court to 1 count of sexual assault and 1 count of exposure. One witness said that she'd received burns after helping the 3 victims. She'd seen the 3-year-old being thrown from the car, and she then heard a woman screaming, my eyes, I can't see." It sounds absolutely horrific, and this monster is still out there. As you can see, he received burns to the right side of his face quite severely, so he's going to be easy to spot, and it's believed he may have travelled back to Newcastle, as that's where he was residing, and that's where he travelled from on the day of the attack. Police are obviously urging the public not to approach this man. He is dangerous, and they've said that if he is spotted, to call 999.
Come on, I don't need no more signs. Can you give me?
The pedophile that you just saw singing that song's name was Plasma Master Don on YouTube, and his story is extremely disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. So this is Plasma Master Don, and his real name was Donzel Edward Owens Jr. Don was born in September of 1947 in Ohio, and in his school years he went by the nickname Froggy. So Don spent some of his professional life as a computer engineer, but at one point he was also a plasma cutter, and that's why people think that his name is Plasma Master Don on YouTube. So on August 17th, 2012, a month before his 65th birthday, he made his YouTube channel. He had already had different YouTube channels in the past, but this was the channel that would explode. Plasma Master Don posted thousands of videos, just funny videos, life moments, and he uploaded a lot of covers of him singing famous songs by Frank Ocean, Joji, and all other sorts of artists. And some of these videos really blew up. They even got almost 3 million views. But shortly after his channel blew up, people started to figure out who Don really was. You see, in 2019, Don was actually convicted of molesting a boy. August 19th, 2019, Dawn is convicted of sexual imposition, aka essaying a young boy. This would make Dawn a hardcore pedophile. So at first, Dawn was hiding himself pretty well on YouTube, but thanks to some internet sleuthing done by people on Reddit, they were able to match the details of the crime and the offender to Plasma Master Dawn. Now, just a few days after these allegations surfaced on Reddit, Dawn stepped away from his YouTube and said that his health was declining rapidly and he wouldn't be able to continue making videos. Obviously, this was directly correlated to the fact that people were just now finding out he was a pedophile. And on December 21st, 2020, Dawn would pass away just 10 days after a famous YouTuber named Nick Crawley released a whole video talking about this case. If you want to check it out, his YouTube channel is still up. It's pretty eerie looking at the videos that he posted. And this just goes to show that some predators like to hide in plain sight.
A Japanese teenager was brutally tortured and gang raped for 44 days before her body was dumped in a drum of wet concrete. On November 25th in 1988, 17-year-old Junko Furuta was biking home from a waitressing shift in Tokyo when 18-year-old Nobuharu Minato kicked her off her bike out of the blue and ran away. A 16-year-old named Hiroshi Miyano came to her aid and offered to walk her home. Little did she know this was a trap. Hiroshi ended up attacking Junko, raping her twice before calling that first guy, Minato, back, and then two other friends came who persuaded him to keep her in captivity. Here is when those 44 days of brutality would begin, and a trigger warning here, things are really about to get graphic. They held her in an empty house belonging to Nobuharu's parents, and there the boys would regularly gang rape her, torture her, and beat her. And not just the four of them, the teens invited other men back to the house with the express purpose of assaulting her. According to their own statements, they would force Junko to smoke and consume large amounts of alcohol. Then they would do things like douse her in lighter fluid and burn her, sodomize her, and starve her. She became so malnourished that she couldn't walk, and her burns and cuts were so infected that she became confined to the floor. Her poor little face was mangled to the point where you couldn't discern her features anymore. And while she was still alive, her body reportedly started to rot. On the 44th day, Hiroshi was in a foul mood because he lost a board game and he took it out on Junko. He doused her in lighter fluid and ignited it, and this is not the worst part. Over the next 2 hours, the boys excessively beat her. They made her drink her own urine. She was having convulsions. They repeatedly dropped an iron exercise ball on top of her until she succumbed to her injuries. They then wrapped Junko's mutilated body in blankets, shoved it in a travel bag, and then put that inside of a 55-gallon drum, which they then filled with concrete. They also threw in a videotape of the last episode of her favorite show because she said she had never gotten to watch it and they didn't want her to haunt them. The boys got caught, and after a police interview, cops found Junko's body inside that drum and were able to identify her through her fingerprints. Hiroshi only got 20 years in jail. Two of the others, a minimum of 5, and the last guy just 8 years in juvie.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminated in acts of cannibalism.
These are the worst of the worst videos on the internet explained, and today we're talking about jellyfish arms. Before I begin, this video is a very hard watch, and I don't recommend looking for it. The video that I'm about to explain is under 1.5 minutes long, and as the video plays, you see a steel-barred jail cell, which looks like it's holding several men. It's hard to see what's going on, but it appears multiple men are straining and holding down one man. On the outside of the cell are 3 inmates. 2 are holding what appears to be thick wooden sticks or metal pipes. It's difficult to tell because of the quality. It's hard to explain, but the man who is being held down has his arms extended through the prison bars. Picture yourself in a jail cell and sticking your arms through the bars and extending your arms out as far as they could. One of the men outside of the cell is holding a rope that is tied to the victim's arm, and he is pulling it tightly, so that the victim's arm is completely outstretched and straight. The 2 men with the metal pipes then start hitting the victim's outstretched arm. After every hit, you see lumps appear on the victim's arm almost instantly. They are hitting him so hard and often that lacerations appear. The screaming from the victim gets more and more intense. After several strikes, the man holding the rope reduces the tension and shakes the victim's arm. You can see that he has several bones broken in his forearm. His arm is partially floppy at this point also. It's worth noting that a bedsheet has been placed and pulled over the victim's head in order to reduce the screaming. Once again, they strike the same arm several more times. The man holding the rope then unties the arm as the prisoner pulls it back into the cell. His forearm is completely floppy at this point, and he struggles to even pull it through the cell bars. And sadly, it doesn't get any better from here. They then take the other arm, tie it up, and pull it through the cell bars once again so the arm is outstretched. They then strike the arm extremely hard multiple times. Despite the loud nature of the inmates and their attempt to muffle the victim's screams, you can still hear them. The sound the metal bar makes when it hits the victim's arm is just sickening, and the screams make it even worse. At 1 minute and 26 seconds into the video, it finally concludes. This is a terrible watch, and there's little to no backstory behind it. But many speculate it was just a normal gang attack, but others say this was a punishment for stealing in prison. Which makes sense as they were incapacitating his arms. Regardless, it's an insanely sickening video, and whatever you do, never ever go searching for it.
This is Jimmy Savile, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. And let me warn you, this is a really disturbing story, so viewer discretion is advised. Jimmy Savile was an English DJ, radio and television personality, and a very, very famous entertainer. Jimmy came from practically nothing and became a superstar in England. When he was younger during World War II, he worked in coal mines, but he eventually started wrestling and then DJing, and that's where he really rose to fame. Now, people in England loved Jimmy Savile. During his illustrious career, he was knighted by the Queen herself, and he was known to be great friends with the royal family. He also hosted a number of huge British television shows like Top of the Pops, and he had his own kids show called Jim'll Fix It. And when Jimmy died in 2011, the country of England mourned him. They were really sad to see him go. But that's also when all of these accusations came out. And soon people knew the truth about Jimmy Savile, and he was not a good guy. When Jimmy was alive, he was known to be charitable, and he worked at hospitals and volunteered his time helping with sick kids and young adults. But this is how he got access to his victims, by acting like the nice guy. And in his time on Earth, Jimmy Savile sexually abused over 400 kids and young adults. He would literally seek out children in their weakest states when they were in the hospital recovering from operations, and that's when he would abuse them. But something that I find extremely disturbing about this whole story is that everybody around Jimmy Savile knew that he was a pedophile, but no one was reporting it. In the hospitals that he volunteered at, nurses would literally tell the children to act like they were asleep when Jimmy was around because they feared what he would do to them. Friends of Jimmy's would make jokes about him being a pedophile in their comedy routines. Even powerful people at the BBC knew that Jimmy Savile was sexually assaulting children, hundreds of children, but they did nothing. You see, he was worth too much. He was too valuable to them. And they needed him to make as much money for them as possible. One particularly gruesome and sick thing that emerged about Jimmy Savile after he died was that he used to go to the morgue in these hospitals, and he would actually have sex with dead bodies. He would also move the bodies around in the morgue, pose them, and take photos of them, laughing while he was doing this. And one nurse even reported watching Jimmy Savile wheel around the dead body of a 4-year-old child in a stroller. Yeah, this guy was incredibly twisted, and he affected so many people's lives. And another sad part of this story is that Jimmy Savile never really had to face any sort of repercussions for his actions while he was alive. When he died as a beloved public figure, somebody that people looked up to and adored. But behind closed doors, Jimmy Savile was a sexual deviant, a pedophile, and just a horrible human being. There is so much to this story, I'm telling you, I couldn't even cover this whole story in 10 TikToks, but if you want me to go into more details about all this, let me know and I'll post a part 2. Because this is literally only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Jimmy Savile and some of the horrible and atrocious things that he did while he was alive. This TikToker stabbed and killed his neighbor in order to get TikTok famous. This is the chilling story of Zachary Latham. So, for a while before this incident occurred, Zachary posted a ton of videos on TikTok. And in a lot of his TikTok videos, he referenced the car that he drove. He also brought up all the facets of being in the army. And yeah, once again, he talked just a lot about his car. But you see, in the years before this incident happened, Zachary had been driving recklessly throughout his neighborhood in his fast, loud car. And apparently, Zachary would get into altercations with his neighbors all the time about his reckless driving. So before the murder, Zach posted a bunch of TikToks on his profile that showed his interactions with who he called a Karen in his neighborhood. In this specific video, which you can see got a lot of views and likes, he's talking to Catherine Durham, and she's calling him out about his reckless driving. He posted a lot of videos of these altercations of people getting angry with him and how he was driving, including this video with 21-year-old William Durham. And he was constantly trying to get people to blow these videos up because, yeah, they loved Karen videos at the time, and he thought this was the pinnacle of good content. But it was obvious to everybody that Zach was thirsting for some sort of TikTok fame, but how far would he go exactly? So the whole time that Zach's Karen series was blowing up, he was encouraging people to drive to their neighborhood and harass his neighbors in the comments section. And like I said before, it really seemed like he was almost getting off on these violent altercations. He loved them because they were giving him this clout. But then on May 4th, 2020, Zachary was driving through his neighborhood when he allegedly swerved and tried to hit one of his neighbor's children. This prompted the entire family of the neighbor who he tried to hit to go over to Zachary's house to confront him. And upon seeing his neighbors approaching him, Zachary ran into his house to retrieve a stun gun and some knives. The family began fighting with Zachary outside. They moved this fight into the garage of Zachary's home, and it was in this garage where Zachary stabbed and killed Timothy Durham. Now, keep in mind, during this entire altercation, Sarah, Zachary's wife, was actually recording the whole thing. Who knows, at the beginning they could have been thinking, oh, this is going to be great content, but it evolved into a murder. Prosecutors alleged that Zach first tried to stab the Durham's son, Billy, but the stab actually ended up hitting Timmy, the father, in the arm. After this is when Zachary used the stun gun on Timmy and began stabbing him, and the fatal wound happened when his left lung was punctured with the knife. So Zachary was arrested after this, but even after he was arrested, he created a TikTok account and was posting actively about his case. And finally, in April of 2023, after a lengthy and very public trial, Zachary was found not guilty on any charges. He was completely acquitted and walked out scot-free. I don't know where Zachary's at nowadays. There was also charges in Florida that were filed against him, so he might be there. But yeah, this is a really disturbing and sad story.
Why is nobody talking about what's going on in Alabama and how bodies of prisoners have been returned to their families with their organs missing? 2 families have now come forward claiming that their loved ones who died while incarcerated in Alabama prisons have had missing organs, and it's left many wondering what's truly going on. This was brought to light when 43-year-old Brandon Clay Dotson was found dead in his cell at Ventress Correctional Facility in Barber County on November 16, 2023. His death was already deemed mysterious to his family because it came on the same day that he was supposed to be considered for parole. His family then spent 5 days trying to claim his body, and when it was finally returned to them, Brandon was severely decomposed and he had bruising on the back of his neck, and his head was also extremely swollen. Based on the condition of his body, his family suspected that foul play might be involved, but they never received a death certificate from the Alabama Department of Corrections. So this prompted them to hire pathologists to conduct a second autopsy, and from those findings, they discovered that Brandon's heart was missing from his chest cavity. This was obviously very alarming to them because they were never notified or given a reason as to why his heart was missing. When reaching out to the ADOC to find out where his heart was, they stated that it was possibly given to the University of Alabama at Birmingham for research purposes. But when the family reached out to the university, they said that they never did an autopsy on Brandon and never received any of his organs. This prompted Brandon's family to file a lawsuit against the ADOC, mainly because they wanted to figure out where his heart was. But even today, it remains missing and unaccounted for. But because of this lawsuit, another family came forward and stated that the same thing happened to them. This time it was the family of 74-year-old Charles Edward Singleton, who died on November 2nd, 2021 at the Hamilton Aged and Infirmed. When his body was finally returned to his family, the funeral director told them that it would be really hard to prepare his body for viewing because of how decomposed Charles was with advanced skin slippage. And when asked why he was in such bad shape, the director told them that he was brought in missing all of his internal organs, including his brain. This came as an absolute shock to the family, just like in Brandon's case, because they were never notified or given a reason as to why this occurred. According to the family, the funeral director told them that normally organs are put in a bag and then placed back in the body after an autopsy, but his body had none. Charles's family were reportedly told that the UAB's Department of Pathology performed the autopsy and likely had his organs. But when they reached out to them, they were also told that they didn't have them and had never received them at all. So both men's organs were taken without consent and are still missing to this day. This has shed light on a disturbing pattern that has happened to many families in Alabama. Although just 2 have been identified because of the lawsuit, a funeral director in the area has stated that there were at least 5 other cases where they received bodies in a similar manner and in such horrible conditions. From the stench being so bad that loved ones couldn't have an open casket, to an incident where a prisoner's scalp had been pulled all the way back and not properly put back in place. The lawsuit against the ADOC is alleging that the organs of these deceased prisoners have been removed for improper purposes and to essentially be experimented on, and that the department is illegally taking organs from prisoners without notifying their family. A list of all organs that have been removed from prisoners that have died in the state's correctional facilities since 2013 has been requested to further investigate. But this has left many families who have had loved ones die questioning whether or not they were murdered, and they want to know what's truly going on in Alabama.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
I'm sorry, I have to cut you off there. The Dajjal is a person. Dajjal is a human being that was born thousands of years ago. Let me tell you a story. Have you heard of Tamim ad-Dari? Tamim ad-Dari used to be a Christian. He's a convert. He became a Muslim. This is back in the day of the Prophet. This is a very long time ago, okay? Tamim ad-Dari was traveling on a ship with other companions or other Muslims. And there was a storm that hit them. They got lost within the storm and the ship landed or came on a shore of an island, small island. This island is on the Arabian Gulf, which used to be modernly they call it the Persian Gulf, but it is the Arabian Gulf, so it's somewhere close by, right? On this island, they get off, a beast approaches them. This beast was so hairy from top to bottom. They couldn't tell the back from its front. That's how hairy it was. This beast spoke and it says, "Ana al-Jassasa. My Lord has been waiting for your arrival. Please follow me." They thought this beast was a jinn. So Tamim ad-Dari and the guys that were with him, they start running away. As they were running on this island, they find a hut and they hide. They decide to hide in that hut. As they go inside, they see a very built man, muscular, chained, tied up. He was so strong that his arms were tied around his neck and he was chained from top to bottom. They freaked out. "Who are you?" they yelled at him. He said, "I'm the one that's chained up. You can hurt me, so it's only fair for me to ask, who are you?" So they tell them who they are. And then he says, "I would like to ask you questions." The guy that's chained up, he's like, "I haven't been outside in a long time. I want to ask about Baysan, the palm trees of Baysan." Baysan is a city in Jordan. "Are there palm trees in Baysan?" They say, "Yes, there are palm trees in Baysan." Are the palm trees giving out fruit, dates? Yes, they are. He said, "One day they won't. They will slowly die off, these trees." He said, "Let me ask you about something else. Is there a lake called Tabariya? Is there water there?" They said, "Yes, we have a Tabariya lake. Tabariya lake is in Al-Sham." They said, "Yes, we have Tabariya lake and it's full of water." He said, "One day this lake will dry up." And then he asks about Al-Zaghar fountain. And then he asks about a prophet that cannot read or write. Did this prophet come? They said, "Yes. Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. He used to live in Mecca and now he lives in Medina." He said, "Now I will tell you who I am. I am Christ. I am Jesus. I will be able to come out only when God allows me to. And one day I will come out. I will spread my message. And I will make people worship me. I will travel the whole world in 40 days. And there will not be a land, a village, and a tribe that I will not come across. Except Mecca and Medina." This is a true horrifying story, part 80. This story took place in Tamil Nadu, Tanjavur in South India. Nisha, a 12-year-old girl back in 1998. Nisha, her sister, and her parents are based in London. However, they visit India on a yearly basis to visit their family. They have a big house, the biggest house in this whole village.
In 1998, they took a trip from London to India for a family visit, and they stayed in their big house. Just a piece of info. In India, women commonly wear a form of jewelry that is an anklet on their feet, and it makes a jingly noise. One day, while the family was in India, the father had to fly back to London for very urgent work. So the mother and her 2 daughters decided to stay longer. Since it was only the 3 of them, they all slept together in the living room downstairs. The night the father left, at 11 p.m., Nisha fell asleep. The mother and Nisha's sister were awake watching TV. They heard these anklet noises, the anklet I told you about. But none of the girls were wearing any anklets on their feet. The sound came from the staircase. It sounded loud and clear, as if a woman was slowly walking down the staircase, coming closer and closer. The mother and her daughters froze in fear, and not one word was uttered. Nisha's mom got up and went closer to the anklet noises to see who it was. She saw a strange outline of a woman, but it wasn't human. She came back to the girls, and from the immense fear and shock, she couldn't tell them what she saw. Since that day, Nisha's mom was never the same, and she still cannot describe what that thing was exactly. 15 years later, Nisha eventually gets married and has her own child. In 2013, from London, Nisha flew to India, and she went to that same house. Every time she steps foot in that house, only at night, the jinn with the anklet decides to haunt her. Sometimes the noises are fast, as if someone is dancing, and sometimes they are slow. However, this noise is still there, and it haunts them every single night. Eventually, the father built a wall in front of the staircase to make his family finally sleep in peace. But the only downside of this wall was you will never be able to see the beautiful staircase they had. But ever since 1998, no one has ever been upstairs. When a property is abandoned for this long, other beings will take your property. And just like Nisha's house, there is a presence of a jinn that likes anklets, that does not want to be disturbed.
These are murders everybody should know about, and this is a massive trigger warning. This was 17-year-old Junko Furuta, and on November 25th, 1988, Junko left school and was walking home, but sadly never made it home that day. She was kidnapped by a group of young men, including a 17-year-old who was identified as Joe, and would later be given the surname Kamisaku. They kept her captive in the house that was owned by Kamisaku's parents, and that was the beginning of her 44 days of torture. Her abductors had no grudge against her, and there was nothing specific they were after. They just attacked her and abducted her because they could. The group repeatedly beat, tortured, and raped Junko. They also invited other men and teenage boys over to the home and encouraged all of them to take turns on Junko. They shaved her pubic hair, they forced her to dance naked in front of them, and also touch herself in front of them. They left her on the balcony in the middle of the night with little to no clothing. They inserted objects into her private parts, including a lit match, a metal rod, a bottle, and force-fed her with large amounts of alcohol, milk, and water. She was also forced to smoke multiple cigarettes at once and inhale paint thinner. They even lit her legs and arms on fire with lighter fluid. By the end of December, Junko was severely malnourished after being fed only small amounts of food and eventually only milk. And due to her severe injuries and infected burns, she became unable to go downstairs and use the toilet, and became confined to the floor of the room she was in. Junko's appearance was drastically altered from the brutality of the attacks. Her face was swollen, and it was difficult to make out her features. Her body was also very crippled, giving off a rotting smell that caused the 4 boys to lose sexual interest in her. On January 4th, 1989, Junko's captors lost a game against another person the night before, and they all decided to take their anger out on Junko. They poured lighter fluid on her body and set her on fire. Junko made attempts to put out the fire but gradually became unresponsive. They continued to punch her and ignited a candle and dripped hot wax on her face. They placed 2 short candles on her eyelids and forced her to drink her own urine. After she was kicked, she fell into a stereo unit and collapsed into a fit of convulsions. Since she was bleeding profusely and pus was emerging from her infected burns, the 4 boys covered their hands in plastic bags, and they then continued to beat her and dropped an iron exercise ball onto her stomach several times. The attack reportedly lasted 2 hours, and Junko eventually succumbed to her wounds and died. Less than 24 hours after her death, the boys were extremely scared of being penalized for murder. So the group wrapped her body in blankets and shoved her into a travel bag. They then put her body into a 55-gallon drum and filled it with wet cement. On January 23, 1989, 2 of the boys were arrested for the brutal crimes against Junko. And believing his friend snitched, one of the killers then told the police where to find Junko's body. And the following day, the police found the drum containing Junko's body. I would show the picture of the bin she was in, but it is pretty disturbing and I don't want to show it on here. But if you want to look it up for context, you could. This case is by far one of the most sickening murders ever, and it just goes to prove that there is so much evil in this world. This poor 17-year-old girl went through 44 days of hell, and I could only imagine the psychological and physical pain she went through. Rest in peace to Junko Furuta, you did not deserve this at all.
There should be no law against killing people. I know it's a wrong thing, but hell, you restrict somebody from it, they're gonna want it more.
We found our victim, and sad as it may be, she's our...
The 2 teenage boys who filmed that video, Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, then went on after recording that to murder their classmate. Their classmate's name was Cassie Jo Stoddard, and this is an infamous case from Idaho. So Brian and Tori were obsessed with horror movies. They specifically loved the movie Scream. And in home recordings that the 2 actually made before the murder, they talked about how they wanted to create a real-life horror movie. Well, on September 22nd, 2006, these 2 decided that their first victim would be their 16-year-old classmate, Cassie Jo. And on that day, they created a death list of other people they wanted to murder as well. That night, Cassie Jo was house-sitting for her aunt and uncle at this property shown above. It's rural, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was the perfect place for a crime. So on that evening, Cassie actually had her boyfriend Matt over. And at some point during the night, Brian and Tori, the killers, who were actually friends of the couple, came over for a tour of the house. Cassie had no idea that while those 2 teenagers were in her home, one of them had gone downstairs and unlocked the basement door so that they could come back later. At some point later on in the night, Brian and Tori returned to the house wearing creepy masks. They then proceeded from the basement to turn off the power in the home, shutting off all of the lights. The 2 were hoping that Cassie and her boyfriend would come down to check on this, but neither of them did, so they turned the lights back on. At one point, Cassie's boyfriend even noticed that the dog was staring down in the basement, and he thought this was suspicious. And that evening, Matt, Cassie's boyfriend, called his mother to see if he could spend the night with Cassie because she felt so scared. Matt's mom said that Cassie could come over to their house with him, but he couldn't spend the night. But Cassie assured Matt that she would be fine, so she sent him on his way, and she was alone in the home. When Matt's mother came to pick him up from Cassie's house, he actually called one of the killers. And when Tori picked up the phone, he was whispering. Now, Matt assumed that's because these 2 were in a movie theater, but they were actually in Cassie's basement. At this point, their plan was a go. The 2 started coming up from the basement. They slammed the door to the basement to scare Cassie, and then they attacked her, stabbing her 30 times. It was said by the person who discovered Cassie's body that this was an extremely gruesome, graphic, and horrific scene. After the murder, these 2 sped off in their vehicle, recorded all of this, and then disposed of all of their clothing, the weapon, the masks, at a nearby nature area called Black Rock Canyon. Eventually, they led investigators back to dig up what they had buried, and what they found was disturbing. This is the murder weapon, and this is an example of one of the masks that these 2 were wearing when they murdered Cassie. Now, thankfully, both of these 2 got life in prison without the possibility of parole. But to end this TikTok, I'm going to show you the rest of that video they recorded after they murdered Cassie. Let me warn you again, this is really disturbing stuff.
Our first victim is going to be Cassie Stoddard. She's going to be alone in a big, dark house out in the middle of nowhere. How perfect can you get? I mean, like, holy shit, dude.
I'm horny just thinking about it.
Hell yeah. It was 9:50. September 22nd, 2006. We know there's lots of doors. There's lots of places to hide. I locked the back doors, so it's all locked. Now we just gotta wait. I just killed Cassie. We just left her house. This is not a fucking joke. I stabbed her in the throat and I saw her lifeless body just disappear. Dude, I just killed Cassie.
This is one of the most horrific cases I've heard recently, so please be warned before watching. 29-year-old Taylor Parker has just been sentenced to death for a crime so horrendous that I can't believe a human is capable of this. Regan Simmons Hancock and Taylor had met online. Their online friendship soon blossomed into a real-life connection. It was 2022 and Regan was married with a young daughter. She was also 8 months pregnant at this time. Taylor was also pregnant, or so it would seem to the outside world. She was posting pregnancy pictures on social media and even hosted a gender reveal party. Little did her loved ones know that she was actually staging the entire thing. Regan and Taylor were really good friends around this time and they were bonding over their pregnancies. Regan even shared a Facebook status thanking Taylor for bringing her round a gift and Starbucks. This was the day before she would be murdered by Taylor. On Taylor's supposed due date, she made her way round to Regan's house in Texas. Shortly after, Regan's mum made a horrifying discovery. Her daughter was face down on the floor, deceased, with blood everywhere. Her mum rang the emergency services and they raced to the scene. It became apparent that her baby had been, and again a massive trigger warning here, ripped out of her stomach, and Regan had been stabbed over 100 times. Meanwhile, Taylor was pulled over for speeding and driving erratically. She'd actually put the baby in her lap with the umbilical cord coming out of her trousers to make it seem like she'd just given birth. When the pair were taken to hospital, the horrors of what actually happened became apparent. The newborn baby tragically passed away and Taylor was arrested. She was sentenced to death, but her defense lawyer said that her loved ones should have done more to protect her earlier on when she was pretending to be pregnant.